Want to turn your passion for drawing into a full-time career? Discover our courses at Brushcamp where you become a master in the realm of digital painting. Brushcamp offers tons of similar courses in illustration, 2D, 3D design. Level up your creativity with free knowledge and courses. Visit brushcamp.com today and explore endless possibilities.
Hello guys, today we will draw this volume combination together, in order to review the knowledge of the tools we have learned. Just like we see how a digital painting will be drawn step by step, from rendering to how to draw the first arrays. Then when you want to edit further, how will you use the tools? I will talk a little bit about object construction. When we build any object, we will create a new layer. When we build any object, there are two important factors for us to be able to construct objects correctly. First is the proportion. What does it mean? This means that any object will fall into three cases. One is its height. Its height will be greater than its width. For example, this cone. Its width is this blue line, right? This blue line will be shorter than the red line. Please note that. That's the first case. This is the case where it will form a vertical rectangle like this, depending on how much its ratio differs. But in general, it will have a greater height than width. The second case will be that the width will be greater than the height. And my last case is what you can guess. If both sides are equal, it will create a shape similar to a square. So here is this circle, right? This sphere will be a circle. And when its width and height it's equal. Please pay a little attention to these characteristics to draw. Regarding proportion, there are only three cases. You should see which case any of our objects will fall into. And you can wonder even more deeply what the ratio of width to height is like. For example, the width is much larger than the height or vice versa. The next thing we need to know is direction. Direction means the directions of the shape. For example, it tilts up like this, or it tilts down. Either it is horizontal or vertical. These are image directions that let us know in what direction the object is located. For example, in this case, I will draw a vertical line here. You will see that the angle created by this vertical line, with the inclined line of the edge of the cone, will form an angle like this, right? And for this angle, we will estimate how much it is. For example, this angle is 90 degrees, quite a large angle. This angle will be about 30, 20 or 25 degrees angle. This is just an estimate, so why do I do it? So when we redraw this picture, we're going to draw a vertical line down first, right? Then I will approximately draw an angle of about 25 degrees, so I can create the tilt of this cone. So all objects have only two problems that we need to pay attention to. That is the proportion, the proportional part, and the second is direction, the direction of the shape. Scale and direction of shape. Those are the things we need to know first in rendering. I turned off that layer. Ctrl-Shift-N to create a new layer. The next thing we need to know is that we don't just look at the proportions of the object, but we need to know the ratio between the sides. For example, in these specific sessions, I have this cone as volume 1, and this spherical object is object 2, so we have to see what the ratio of these two things should be compared to each other. For example, just looking at it, then we would guess that this sphere has half the scale of this cone. We'll approximate that. I estimate that the ratio of the sphere will be half the ratio of the cone. The first step is that we need to estimate such a ratio, and next we will see how the whole of these two objects will become an image. I will put in a rectangular frame. I will not include shadows. Just put the object in the frame. As for the shadow, it's not an object, it's just a shadow. It is not a fixed object, because just if we rotate to a different perspective, we will get a different type of shadow. So we only focus on objects We will see how this object will fit in the image. For example, now I see that the objects are located in another frame like a square. From this frame we will divide the ratio in half to see what it will look like. Then we will know doing this is like researching before we draw. We will study how we need to draw. For example, here I divided it into 4 equal parts. Of course, the parts I share will be a bit off somewhere. I feel like this bottom part is bigger than the top one. Relatively enough is okay. Divide into 4 equal parts and we will see that this focal point will lie almost equal to the sphere. The sphere will encroach to this side a bit. The sphere will encroach to this side a bit. I will draw a frame here. Quickly draw a frame. As an example, I divided it into 4 equal parts. For example, if it's a rectangle, I divide it into 4 equal parts, so the sphere will also be located right here. This sphere. The curvature of the sphere will extend to this side a little. So you can visualize how I draw. I have markers to make positioning easier. For example, if I have these markers, then I will be able to locate the volume much easier. That's the way we can create objects. We'll see how steep this angle is. We're just guessing. It may not be 100% correct, but we're just guessing. I predicted earlier that it would be about 15 or 20 degrees. Doing so allows us to draw the shape more specifically and clearly. We can delete these lines. Delete these lines. When first drawing, I think we should draw at a 1:1 scale first. 1:1 scale means that we observe the object scale. We will draw it at the same scale, drawn at 1:1 scale. Then that would be the easiest way. Ctrl+J to duplicate this out. Ctrl+T so you can drag this over here, so that we can redraw the object we want. For example, this is the frame I built to draw this object. Let's see how I will start drawing. First, we can lower the opacity of this one a little bit. I will create a sublayer and fill it with color. We can delete these so there is no impact. On this side, we can click on the crop tool to stretch the area of the frame a bit. Pull it out a little. This part is the leftover part. It has no color and will have checkered patterns like this. We click on this background layer and unlock it. Then I fill the background color with white. Press Ctrl+ to fill the color until it is full. Now we lock it so that when drawing, it won't get mixed up in that layer. So I have a 1:1 scale drawing frame like this. After having this frame, what do we do now? First we will draw the background. I choose a rectangular selection like this. Choose as 1:1 ratio. Now I will fill it with a color. I will choose a color with gray tones. For those who are new to drawing, you can press Alt and select that color to use quickly. Or if you like, you can draw it yourself. For example, now I choose a color in the middle. I will press Alt to fill the color like this. So we have the background. Name it background. Now we will build the image together. This will be the line_sketch layer. We will sketch the objects. Okay. Now first we'll draw the sphere, right? Of course, we can't use a brush and draw a sphere ourselves. You can also draw, but it will be quite difficult. I will use the elliptical tool to draw a sphere. You will know that this circle will spread out a little bit. It will be somewhere from this point to this point. A little bit out, we will estimate to draw. For example, divide it in half and its center is here, right? Its highest point is here and here. Now we will draw a shape following these points. This is the area that the sphere should be in. First we determine its position. Then we will draw it completely later, so the sphere will be simulated as a circle and spread out from this area a bit. After drawing the sphere, now we will continue to draw this cone. A while ago I also determined that it would be around 20 degrees. So the first point position of this cone will be here, right? It's not located at the midpoint but will be lower down here. The first position will be down here. This is about the first part we sketched. It will be here. This point will be a little higher than the other point, and I will align it vertically to see. After Aglin comes up, I see it will be at this point. In this place. I'm coming over here, but the point will be high here, not the point below. After determining the location, the point will be located here. We will have markers to position so we can draw easily. Of course there will be mistakes somewhere, but I think there won't be too many mistakes. For example, here we can draw a line across here. You will see it will be right here. So initially I chose a slightly high score. Draw a line across and you will see that the point will be at this position, so we get 1 point. As for this point along, we can estimate it. Draw it down and it will be in a range like this. Because we are drawing at a 1:1 scale, it means that whatever this side looks like, we will draw it again at the same scale. Point will be in this range. Please pay attention, it will be in this position. Connect these 2 points and we get an edge. The top of the cone will tilt a bit. I also drew vertically down and saw that it was cut into a smaller part than the part on the left. This part will be bigger, this part will be a little smaller. The point will be here and I draw the line straight up, and we will get the top of the cone. We get the top here, connected. In this video we don't have to learn too much about complex theories like perspective. We just think of it as a flat 2D shape and we draw it. I don't put too much emphasis on theory. In this part is the touch point with this sphere. Can you see it? We draw across to see where it will be. It will be at this location. It will be about here. I will draw across. Draw a line across and it will cut here. So from this point I will connect through. Connect through. Connect points. From there we got the cone. I think it will get a little taller at this range. Match. You can see that the part from here will drag down here. If the part here drags down, it will be partially obscured. This edge will be covered. And create a small triangular space here. You see? You see, I will delete this. You see it creates a little triangular space right here. I will use a red brush to redraw it so it's easier to see. It's going to create a pretty small triangular space right here. So it's the same here. I will also connect the edge and create a tiny triangle shaped space like that. I'll paint its layer. Its layer is above. Here is its layer. From this point, I will drag down a point here to form a small triangle. Connect points. It will form a small triangle like this. Drag straight down and it will fall on the point here. Drag straight here. It will create a cone for us. I just need to connect from this point to this point. So I have created our basic rendering. We should draw at a 1:1 ratio first. Drawing at this ratio will be easier. You don't need to practice drawing at a difficult level. So now that we have the rendering part, this sphere will of course be redrawn. We will redraw ourselves using elliptical. This is just a rough rendering so we can visualize the form. Now we'll fill everything with a slightly lower opacity. We will start filling the sketch with color. 𝗍𝗐𝗀𝗋. Of course, I will put the line_sketch layer at the top, so we can see it easier. Now we will have to create a shape for it. Usually we can use the polygonal lasso tool to select these points to create a shape. Polygonal lasso tool will help us create objects with hard edges like this. This is method 1. Second way, we use the pen tool, press the P key, and dot on these points. Mark these points accurately, and hold down Shift and drag across. Here I also dot here, and I finish the command, dot here. And then Ctrl Enter will create a selection for us. Then we will fill in the color. For example, this is a cone. Name it volume 1. Name it volume_1. We just need to fill in a simple color. For example, I will fill a color at about 50 or lighter at this range. Press Alt Backspace to fill in the color. Okay. I can reduce the thickness of the line_sketch layer a bit. This is our volume 1, right? Press Ctrl on the layer, and it will display the selection of volume 1. Next is the sphere. We must use the elliptical marquee tool to draw. Hold down the Shift key to adjust it to be round, and then I will just draw it. Ctrl Shift N to create a new layer. This selection will fill the layer we want with color. For example, if we fill this selection with color on any layer, it will display the color on that layer. For example, now I create a new layer called layer 4. Then I will fill color into volume 2. This sphere will have the same color as the other one, but we can make it a little lighter. Alt Backspace to fill with color. So we get the sphere. I will later create a clipping mask and sublayer for these so that when I draw, they won't smudge. Now we don't need the line_sketch layer anymore, so we can turn it off. Turn off all grid layers and guidelines. And we've got this mass of objects. What about the shadow parts? We will draw later. In general, we have this volume. I will have to press V and click on the background layer. Press Ctrl T, hold Shift and drag the background to make it a little bigger so we can draw the shadow later. Now we will draw. Drag in a bit to balance both sides. Now we will start drawing. Ctrl S to save. All files will be lost, so remember to save them. We have finished the construction part. Remember the construction method to build simple blocks into forms. Next we will have to draw large light and dark areas for the volume. That means we separate it into two colors, light and dark. When drawing, we will see that there are many components of an object. When it is illuminated with light, it includes highlight, which is the lightest place. Center light is the light in the center. Halftone means the gradual transition of tones. Terminator is the transitional area of core shadow. That is the boundary between light and dark. Reflected light is the reflective part. For example, this light is yellow, so it will reflect a yellowish color here. Next is cast shadow, created by the object blocking the light from the light source. And finally, the occlusion shadow is the shadow that's located right here. Sometimes I will call it ambient occlusion now. This means that if two objects are located close to each other, a shadow will be created right in the gap, so that we can imagine that the two objects are standing close. Here the shadow on the tabletop and the sphere are close together, so this area will be very dark. The light couldn't affect it in that. You imagine that the light will shine from this side. When the light shines down, the shadow will fall on the table and reflect up here. And it will create reflected light, which is the reflective part. Reflect means bend or throw back waves of light. I just said it briefly like that. Now we will find out together. You can see that it's quite bright down here. If you change this light-colored surface to a black tabletop, it will reflect the black color. Press Ctrl and click on this red line to see which layer it is. to turn it off. Now let's draw together. We can adjust the background a little. This background has a color transition. The top is dark and the bottom is light. Ctrl-Shift-N or click here to create a new layer. Now clipping mask with this background. Press Ctrl-Alt-G so that it won't be blurred when drawing. Now we can use a soft brush to fill in the color. Increase the brush size a bit and fill in with color. I will choose a dark color and fill it like this. The fill above is bold like this. Choose a darker color to fill on this. Of course, we are drawing in black and white. Remember to drag the color close to this bar so it becomes black and white. If you choose here, it will produce a different color. So remember to pull close in here. So next, let's draw the basics like that first. We can paint the lower part with a light color layer. If you are careful, you can create a new layer and paint a slightly brighter color. Paint a light color layer like this. Something like that. It's basically like this, dark on top and light on the bottom. Next we will have to draw the layers of this cone. First select our cone. We will have a layer below which is the shadow layer. Ctrl-Shift-N and create layer. This layer will be cast shadow. Cast shadow. We will also use the polygonal lasso tool, or use the pen tool to draw it sharp. I prefer to use pen tool. Select that exact point and drag it out. You can clearly see that. This will be a slightly tilted diagonal line. I'll drag it out to this size. On this side, I will drag it out to this distance. The line is a bit horizontal, right? We'll probably have to choose a point a little above here, this part above. It will be something like this, right? You can see that the shadow is some distance away from this point. Please pay attention. Then we will be the same distance away. Some distance away like this. This part. The line looks a bit horizontal. I will stay in this range. If it's wrong, we can adjust it later. Next, drag it down to this point. Click on this point to end the pen tool. If you want to edit, you can use the key. Press the key and it will return to the white cursor. We can click on this point and drag it up and down to make it exactly what we want. To create a selection, we will Ctrl-Enter to make it a selection. Then we will fill in the color. Its color will be a bit dark. Ctrl-Alt-Backspace to fill with color. Ctrl-D to exit the command, so we have the shadow part. I think this shadow will stick out, but not like this. Let me Ctrl-Z. This point should have gone all the way out here. Must stay out here. Ctrl-Enter and fill color. It should have left an extra space like this. For example, if it has this extra point like this. How can we cut this part? We press Ctrl and click on the background layer. At that time, we can only draw inside here. If I want to delete the outside part, I invert my selection. The selection that I'm selecting is in here. So now I'm inverting it. So how to reverse? Ctrl-Shift-I or click Select. Select Inverse Ctrl-Shift-I. Now it has turned outward and we use the eraser to erase this part. Ctrl-D to exit command. This is cast shadow. The lower part of this sphere also has cast shadow. We will create the second cast shadow. This will be cast shadow 1. This will be cast shadow 2. Click here and press Ctrl-C. Go to this layer and press Ctrl-V, cast shadow 2. Cast shadow 2 will be combined by an oval circle below. and it will shadow above. I will use the ellipse to fill it. This will have a moderate degree of correctness. In this range, maybe it will be a little bit off. Hold down the backspace key to move the selection, so that it lies exactly where you want. This is our selection. I'll fill it in with color, dark color like this. Ctrl T and rotate it to tilt it a bit. It tilts slightly from front to back. And press Ctrl D to exit the command. This is our shadow. This shadow also affects the top of this cone, but I will draw it later. Now press Ctrl and click on this volume. Ctrl Shift N or click here to create a new layer. Press Ctrl Alt G to create clipping mask. Then now we will separate the objects. How will we do this? Now I will separate the value. This side is dark, so I will fill this side with a dark color. I will use the polygonal lasso tool. Let's look closely at this block. Do you see it? Here there is a small surface. Fill in color. Now I will fill in the color. I will select this layer. I will change to using the pen tool to make it more stable. Dot at this exact point. Look closely at the reference to see if it's tilted at the right angle we want. And then we can block out as well. It's okay to block out loud like this. It's okay. Because it's just a sublayer, it can't smudge out of this cone. Ctrl Enter to create a selection. And then we can fill it with a dark color. Now we can pick this color but fix it a little brighter. And fill it in. Press Alt Backspace. We will fill in the color. Like this. Up here I see a small surface. We can also draw a little, to make the surface a little more visible. Not that it doesn't exist. We can create a new layer. We can always delete this part above. I will use a hard brush. Or you can use the polygonal lasso tool to draw quickly. Let me just delete it. Click delete to remove that color. It should look like that, right, slightly tilted. This sphere is similar. I can create a selection like this and fill it with color. But because it is a soft block, I usually use a soft brush to draw. If we use a hard brush, we will later have to use the smudge tool to blend. That's a bit cumbersome, so let's do it from the beginning. Let me see. I can click volume 2, I create a new layer like this. Then we can draw a light and dark border, which roughly divides the sphere in half, bottom and top. The dark area is a bit smaller than the upper part. The light and dark border is located here. I can use soft brush. Increase brush size. Then I will choose a dark color to fill here. For example, if I fill quickly, I will fill it like this. Fill like this. Fill it with a fairly dark color. Fill like this to visualize first. Like this to create light and dark patches faster. I will later fill in the reflective areas below. The edge of the object will also darken a bit. This is the first step for us to draw the object. These objects have light and dark patches. This lower part is close to the table surface, so you can see that it is strongly reflective. The light and dark border is blurred, but up here it's dark because it's farther from the tabletop. The reflective light is not strong enough. So this place is darker. The part below is more strongly reflected. This place is dimmer, right? The light and dark border has a darker color. Let's just fill in the dark color evenly and we'll edit it later. Now let me observe the hole again. I think it's quite okay. Now I will draw with each object. First is the cone. We create a new layer. Create a sublayer. Then I fill in the color. For example, now I need a darker color. I just took the selection in here. I will paint here. We can press Ctrl-H to hide so we can see more easily. And we can press Ctrl-H again to show the selected area again. That means I'm taking a selection of the dark area. I drew on layer 8, but I took the selection of the layer below. Get the selection by pressing Ctrl and moving the mouse here. It will show a dashed frame surrounding this box. When clicked, it will take that selection for us. But I won't draw on an existing layer. I will draw on a new layer so that if I make a mistake, I can edit it. Usually I separate it like that so it's easier to edit. Press Ctrl-H to hide the selection for easier viewing. The example above is darker, so you can see its color. It's darker up here, but it's brighter down here, because the reflector bounces off the table and reflects up here. So please pay attention when painting. For this one, I'll darken the color a bit. I'll use a soft brush to paint. Create a color transition downward. It's also dark down here. The place where these two objects meet will be a little dark. Like this. I reflect the light upwards. Like this. Like this, and we will get transition. Before and after. The shadows and crevices like this will be darker, right? Areas close to the object will be darker. And areas farther away will be brighter. We click on Cast Shadow Layer. Click on Cast Shadow 1 and Ctrl-Shift-N to create a new layer. And create sublayer. Press Ctrl-Alt-G to keep the paint from being smudged. Now I'm going to fill this with a darker color. Near this object, I will fill it with a darker color. It is possible that the color is darker than the object. Usually the shadow color will be a bit darker than the object. Fill in with dark color. Like this. Have you seen it? Let me turn it on and off so you can see it easier. At first it wasn't there, but after painting it, it appeared clearly. I had a selection. If you don't believe me, let me press Ctrl-H to show you. You see, that's why when painting, there's no smudging out of this area. Remember Ctrl-D to exist previous selection. Now I'll just paint in here. The shadow area near the object will be dark, but the further away it is, the lighter it will be. Later we will have to make it blur here too. Near the object the edge will be sharp, far away it will be blurry. The shadow will have that characteristic. Closer to the object the color will be darker. Farther away it will be lighter. Next, now what happens to the bright area? We'll have to draw another shadow here. It will be located in volume_1. Create a new layer, remember. We manage everything in each different layer. Then it will be easier to edit. For example, here. Now if I want to create a curved shadow here, I can use the pen tool. Click on this exact point. Now I'm going to bend it up, right? I know the position of the curve will need to be at a certain range, for example at this range. It will be in the middle of this sphere. Create a selection as usual. Like this. Press Ctrl Enter to create a selection, then fill it with a color. Pick a certain color and fill it here. Press Alt Backspace to fill in the color. Like this. Maybe the color won't be so black like this. You can fill it with a brighter color. Alt Backspace. The color will look like this or maybe a little darker. This dark. A little brighter. If you feel like filling colors in this way takes a long time, you can press Ctrl-U to open the Hue Saturation panel. We will adjust its lightness. Increase or decrease brightness and darkness to get the color you want. Please pay attention. We have the shadow. You will see that the edge of this shadow is blurred. We will do this later. Next. Now I will start making this sphere. We continue to create a new layer. A new layer. Then I paint these reflective areas. I will use a soft brush. I will paint these reflected lights. Remember to press Ctrl+S to save. Increase the brush size a bit. Now I'll pick a slightly brighter color. This is the color of the dark area. Now I will choose a brighter color to paint here. This will be the reflective part. I will paint it. This reflective part is quite dark, so I may have to paint this core shadow even darker. For example, here, I feel like I have to paint the core shadow darker for it to reflect. I will paint this core shadow with a darker color. This one will be darker. A little darker. This top color should also be a bit darker. If you are not familiar with using a soft brush, just use a hard brush and then blend the colors. Like the way in the color blending video that I instructed. Remember that the edge of the object will be a bit dark, to make the block look evenly round. As for the bright object, it will be in the middle. In the middle here it will light up, obviously. This sphere looks quite round. Now create a new layer and create a sublayer. Now let's draw a little overview. I picked this color, I'll brighten it up a bit and I'll paint it. This is reflective. I painted it like this. I will lightly paint like this first. Then we will see that it will be brightest right at the contact point below. This part is closest to the table surface, so the light reflects. Now I will paint it to brighten it up a little more. I will paint one more time. You can also create a new layer if you are careful. If it is damaged, we can erase it and repaint it. This place will be the brightest place. Like this, brighter. Lighter right here. Light right here. But sometimes the edge of the object will darken like this. Do you see that the color at the edge is a bit dark? Then I will delete it. I can delete it a bit. Which layer is that? Is it this layer? Then you can create a new layer. I will erase it by selecting this color and darkening the edge of the object. To make the edge color similar to the shadow color here. Like this. You can see this sphere has a dark edge and a bright reflective area here. The edge is a bit dark, the reflective part above is a bit dark. Like this, the sphere already looks quite round. If you want to be even stronger, you can add the highlights below, it's up to you guys. The bright area here, if you want, just make it brighter. Brighten up some area here. It's okay to brighten it up a bit. Like this. The same goes for the shadow. In Cast Shadow 2, I will also create a new layer. I will clip the mask so that it won't be smudged when painting. This adjacent part you see is dark, obviously. I'm going to pick this color and darken it a little bit. The adjacent part will be dark, please pay attention. The part adjacent to the object will be a little darker. And it will spread out. I think the edge of this object will also be dark. And this shadow will be brighter. We choose a brighter color to fill in, creating a new layer. Paint this shadow a bit brighter, not too dark. Roughly it will look like this. The area here will be darker. Paint a little darker. I also painted this part of the object a little darker. Let this area sink into darkness. Like this. You can see that the light and dark patches are clear, but the shadows are a bit sharp. I will fix them later. In general, we already have the light and dark areas. Now we will continue to do the other parts. For example, now the cast shadow section is here. I create a layer. This is a gap, do you see it? Between the object and the tabletop there will be a gap like this. I'll paint it in so it doesn't look like it's stuck together. Paint here. The gap will be slightly open. If you want it sharp, you can use the polygonal lasso tool. Create a selection here. Delete less. It will be sharp like this. If you don't like it, you can use a soft brush to erase it. Delete. Have you understood yet? With this sphere, I can also add a brightest area to it. For now we have only focused on the reflective part of this sphere, but we forgot that there is also the highlight part. We'll use a soft brush, create a highlight point here, pick this color and brighten it up a bit. Paint to create highlight areas. It has the brightest area of the sphere. You dot gently, do you see? It has brightened a little, which is the area we need. It brightens up a bit. With these two objects, you can clearly see that it is not too sharp. On this side it is because we will be too sharp. We can add a little blur layer. For example, I click on this layer, the dark layer. I can make it a little blurry by using the blur tool. Go to filter, go to blur and select Gaussian blur. And we're going to blur it. You see, it's blurred. Initially the edge was still sharp, but then it became blurry. I set the ratio just enough. You can see that it is already blurred. The parts above are the same. The upper part can be used with a brush to paint it a little darker, darkening the color at the edge of the object. Or use the smudge tool to blur. With shadows we do the same. We also blur it, blur with the blur tool, or you can use the smudge tool. Cast shadow is located here. I will use the smudge tool to blur. Just adjust the strength parameter low. I will blur here. Up here, there's only a little blur, but in the distance there will be more blur. Drag lightly. You can see that it will be blurred. The far parts will be more blurred, the near areas will be sharper. Our shadow will be like that. These shadows are similar. If you see it blurs evenly at the edge a bit, it means you can use the blur tool. Here. This is cast shadow _2. Go to filter, go to blur and select Gaussian blur. Set the ratio lightly. It's just at this level. This place needs to be more blurred, right? You can see that this shadow part is blurry but still sharp, but this part is quite blurry. So we will use the smudge tool. I will redo and I will use the smudge tool for fun. Here it will be sharp, so will this one. Same with this. This part is the same, use the smudge tool. Make it blurry. For example, you want this part to be more blurry. For example, in this selection, if you want this area to be brighter, just pick the color and fill it. Like this. So we can draw our block very easily. As for this area, I remembered that I didn't paint this area just now. For this bright area, we can create a new layer. I can paint it here. For example, we can darken this edge part a little. Just a little darker. Darken it a bit. Darken the upper edge a bit. Or this edge will lighten up a little bit. The place where light and dark meet will lighten up a bit. Or this surface above, make it brighter. When you're afraid of smudging your paint, you can use the polygonal lasso tool. Use the polygonal lasso tool to lighten the paint a bit. We will observe the object. For example, if you want this area to be darker, just create a new layer and paint on it. If you want, you can paint more. I think these two objects are already quite okay, so I will stop. For example, this background part. Please observe and see if you like it. For example, you can make this dark area a little bit darker. Darken this upper part a little bit. Increase the brush size so I can blend more here. As for this bright part, we can make it brighter so that it contrasts with our shadows. I'll lighten a bit on the areas that come into contact with the shadow. Exposed areas like this, I can make it light up to make it stand out. Do you see these areas light up? It's bright like this. I'll paint it. This back part also lights up. In this range. Let me see this place, my object. I can make it a little brighter right where it meets the shadow. Wherever it is adjacent to the shadow, we will lighten it a little and it will look beautiful. If you don't believe me, let me show you. When turned off, it looks normal, but when turned on, it makes the light and dark patches clearer. And the light looks more magical. As you can see. Want to draw a digital painting? Then you will also use tools, such as the brush, creating a selection with the lasso tool, or the pen tool, use clipping mask so the paint doesn't bleed out. Just like that, we can draw a digital painting, right? Through this session, I hope you have understood how to go from the construction steps to the step where we paint and complete a painting. Thank you for watching. See you again in the following videos. Bye bye.
Please like and subscribe to our channel.